This is the story of my trip to Kapinga in the Pacific Ocean, and I'll try to tell the whole story from beginning to end. I hope you enjoy it. I have these old slides that I put together many, many years ago, and we'll see if they're helpful. The story begins when I was about 5 or 6 years old. My father had a map of the world on the wall of his study, and right at my eye level, at whatever height I was then, across the Pacific Ocean was a long, long word, Kapinga. And if you look on this map, just towards the bottom and a little bit to the right, you can see it says Kapinga Atoll. Well, as a little kid just learning to read, I struggled and sounded that word out, and people were so impressed with my superb reading ability that I was obviously cheered and reinforced for it, and I quickly became fixated on Kapinga. So through my childhood, I would go to the public library and read about Kapinga. I would look it up on atlases. I would try to get more information about it. I remember as a teenager when we were at the age where we made crank phone calls to people, I called the long distance operator to see if I could connect through a call to Kapinga, things like that. So it was an important part of my life. To thinking about this island, trying to learn more about it. There wasn't much information about it. I think I found a Britannica article about it, and that was about all. And it became important to me in other ways. When I was helping people learn how to be reading teachers, I used to write Kapinga on a blackboard and let people try to sound it out, which they could do. And then we would talk about the importance of phonics and being able to decode words that you'd never seen before, things like that. And then a breakthrough came for me in the early 1980s. I saw a magazine on an airplane that said that the island of Pohnpei was the gateway to Kapinga, and that there were Kapinga people living there. So I immediately got interested in going to Pohnpei, and in 1987, Linda and I were able to go there and teach at the Community College of Micronesia in Pohnpei, and then when the term was out, to travel around to different parts of Micronesia. So if you look at this map of Micronesia, where it says, you can see where Kapinga is, and Palakir, it says, which was the capital of the country, and that's on the island of Pohnpei, where we lived in 1987 and 88 and taught in college. So this is the story of this amazing voyage, this amazing adventure that we had, which completely changed my life, and I think it changed Linda's permanently. So this is one of the many little coral reefs that make up Kapinga. It's a circle, or not a circle, but a round atoll of 20 some odd coral islands, some of which are inhabited and some of which aren't, and some of which are used as gardens and farms. And the way you get there is you fly from Honolulu. There's a plane, what was called the Island Hopper, that flew from Honolulu to Guam and back and stopped at all the islands in between. And you can see that the plane, it was Continental Airlines, and the plane was divided in half. Half was a passenger compartment and half was baggage. And the baggage in this case consisted almost entirely of beer, as I recall. So that's how we got there in this flight that seemed to take forever. And, eventually got to Pohnpei, and this is a map of Pohnpei, which is a small island. I think it's about the size of Salt Spring Island, but it's divided into several different municipalities, and where we lived is on this map was sort of halfway between Colonia and Net, and we used to often go to Lididuninat Falls to go for a swim on warm days. So this is Pohnpei. And this is a guy named Gene Ashby who was at the college. He was the English teacher at the college, and he was a character. That's the only way to describe it. And this is the airport in Pohnpei, the international airport, where once a week a flight from Honolulu arrived, and once a week a flight from Guam arrived, and just about everybody went out to greet it. And this is the port of Colonia in Pohnpei. and about once a month a ship would arrive and all the stores would be full of goods, and then gradually the stores would get emptier and emptier until the next ship arrived. And this is a mangrove swamp at low tide. The island of Pohnpei, really the only beach it has was one artificially created so people could use it. The island is entirely surrounded by mangrove swamps, and they are biologically, that's the most magic places I've ever been. They have, at low tide, they're mud like this. At high tide, they fill with water, and you can go through them in boats and channels and things. They have fish that live in trees. They have amazing forests. It's a rich environment. And yeah, here's some mangrove trees. And the fish I remember in the trees are called lidodudiaps in the Pohnpeian language. And they were little fish that I think at high tide they would sit on the branches of the trees, and then when the tide went out they were able to leap off and catch insects flying by. And so it's kind of an interesting lifestyle that they had. And this is one of the waterfalls. I think this is Keparohi Falls, if I recall. But there are lots of waterfalls on Pohnpei because there's lots of water. And there's lots of water because it's almost the rainiest place in the world. It's much rainier than Tofino and places like that. And there's Linda with her bicycle, and in the back is Sokez Rock, which is sort of the trademark rock of Pohnpei. We bicycled around a lot. This is not unusual there, a man in a lava using a weed eater. I think as outsiders from the West, we were constantly struck by the contrast between local culture and traditions and modern technology and modern ways of being. And one of the things that happens there is storms. And this was a typhoon that hit the island of Truk, which is about, I don't know, a couple hundred miles away, and we were on the edge of it, so we had amazing amounts of wind and amazing amounts of rain. And these are palm trees just outside of our house, which are quite remarkable. And these are students at a junior high school who were in a dance competition, and we were friends. Their teacher was a friend of ours that we'd gotten to know, named Victor, and so he had us come and take pictures of all the kids and watch them dance. And these are the professional dancers in Pohnpei. They dance sitting down, and they would perform for ceremonies and events and for tourists. Everybody dances there. Here's the professional dancers again. The schools all have dance competitions and dances. And there they are again. And then you can see it rains a lot in Pohnpei. This was a rainy day, and again the professional dance crew doing a dance, and the dance floor is a little bit flooded. And then these are students at the college we were at. They had what do they call it, the college open day, where all the students from different islands would perform. So these are the islands of Pohnpei, Mokil and Pingalap. The student in the center was one of my students named Ruthie, and the one on the right was named Rapiner. And I can't remember the names of the others, but they were just wonderful young people. And so they're wearing the costumes from their island and performing for everyone. And these are students from the Western Solomon Islands, wrong islands, John, Western Micronesia, which was the island of Yap mostly, and the outer islands around Yap. And the student in the center was one of our favorites for both of us, named Agatha. And these are students from the Marshall Islands, and they're very modern. They wear running shoes and blue jeans and things because the Marshall Islands have a lot of money from the reparations that were paid to them for the nuclear bombing. So the Americans came and nuked their islands and made them uninhabitable, and then gave them a bunch of money, which they can then spend in the United States buying shoes and blue jeans and things like that that other islanders don't have. These are school buses in Pohnpei. Everybody rides in the back of trucks of different sizes. And this is the capital of the country. This is Palikir Colonia. It's the main city in the country, and this is probably a really busy day. There certainly was not traffic and crowds. It was a quiet place to be. This is one of my students, a Truckese student. Again, taking advantage of the rain. She's washing her hair under the gutter at the college. And when it rained there, it rained so hard and so continuously, you just had to hide someplace or wash your hair. And then the rains would go for a couple of hours, and then you'd have a little bit of a dry spell. And Pohnpeians have the nicest smiles on the planet. This is the librarian. And just going to the library was a delight, because she would greet you at the door with a smile like that, and you couldn't say sad with long at all. The sad thing, of course, is how poor developing countries are. This is the children's section in the public library, so the entire community, all the children in the community have this many books to read. And these are the kids that lived near our house around, and they just played all the way in the yard. They were always busy and always having fun. They were from Kashrai, and this is their whole family, who became friends with ours, and who lived right near us. All Kashraian people, wonderful. And the woman on the left made the best sushi I've ever had. Our students, well, Linda and I both did, is we took our students on picnics and holidays and outings of various sorts. So this was a group that we went on a picnic with, and had a great time. There's me with all the female students. And there's Linda with the male students having fun. And this was an organization called Micronesia Bound, which was a volunteer youth services thing where Linda and I both volunteered during the time we were there, in addition to teaching at the college. And this is Rapina, one of my students, and her grandmother and their puppy. The main thing they do in Pohnpei is have feasts. And at the feast, what they do is they eat yam and pig, and they drink a drink called, well, it's like kava from Fiji. And so they take the roots that this drink is made from, and they pound them with stones and mix them with water and chant and sing and carry on. And these people are making more drugs to drink. And people bring yams, and that's a big yam. That's what would be called a two-man yam, because it takes two men to lift it up. And the growing of giant yams is an important sport, I guess, on Pohnpei. And so every feast, people are bringing their yams for other people to admire. And here's a much bigger yam. This yam, they needed whatever it is, a 3/4 ton truck to bring it. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people to lift that up. So that's a 6-man yam, I guess. Quite amazing. And here's people pounding the cacao to make the drink. So they pound it, the roots, and squeeze it, and this sort of liquid that looks kind of like mucus goes in the cup, and you drink it, and it anesthetizes your legs and things. The guy on the right is a man named Russell from Alberta, who had gone to Pohnpei with a National Geographic expedition many years earlier and just stayed on, and was sort of the expert on the archaeology of Pohnpei. And the guy on the left is named Joe Habuchmai, and so there's Russell taking us on a tour to the ancient city of Nan Madol, which is on the island of Pohnpei. The city built out of basalt logs, and it was already an abandoned ruin when the first Spaniards arrived in the 17th century. So Nobody really knows much about the people that built it. The Pohnpeians had lots of stories and legends, but a lot of it's quite mysterious. There's Linda with one of the walls. There's both of us with another wall. And there's our students on another picnic we went on. Yeah, we rented a truck for the day so we could take all the kids out to the country and had a great time. These college students were fun-loving, but they were also very shy, and they were also very, very bright. It's a competitive school system they have, so that any group of college students there, if they were in Canada, would be the top of their class. And then the big adventure we had on Pohnpei was learning how to sail outrigger canoe from Kapingamarangi. So on Pohnpei, we made friends with Kapingamarangi. This guy Detiro was the postmaster on Pohnpei, and he was a famous wood carver and from Kapingamarangi, and he and I became friends and talked about the joys of sailing. And he was sad that people had quit sailing and just do outboard motors now. And so with some difficulty, we did a deal where in San Diego sent rolls of orange and turquoise sailcloth, Dacron sailcloth from the States, and the local sailmaker there was able to make sails for their canoe. And this was the day we launched it after they'd made the sails. Yeah, we thought they'd have an orange sail and a turquoise sail, but instead they made two sails. So there's the canoe, and there we are. So we're not us sailing, we're in a motorboat taking pictures, but there's the canoe sailing. It was an incredible experience, outrigger canoe, 20-25 knots. You tack the boat. You always sail with the outrigger on the upwind side, so you have to tack the boat by carrying the sail from one end of the boat to the other and heading off in the opposite direction, which is actually a very efficient way to come about. So this was our cultural adventure with Kapingamarangi. We became friends with people in their community and spent a lot of time. And this is the men's house. Although men and women went there, they showed videos, and people mostly just sat around and drank coffee in the Kapingamarangi village. And people would sit there and carve sharks and things like that to sell to tourists and that sort of. And one of the interesting things they did when somebody died, they would bury them in the front yard and keep it all decorated and nice for at least. And these are little kids with big knives, which is what you saw all over Micronesia. And then we were able to travel to the outer of Pohnpei, which are low atolls rather than a big mountainous island like Pohnpei. And you go there on a field trip ship. This is the Micro Glory. There's two kinds of tickets you can get. You can get a deck ticket or a cabin ticket, and away you go. So there's the ship, and it's sort of a shallow draft ship, super stable, but kind of fun. It was a big event. Going on the way out, the ship was loaded with coconuts and pandanus and pigs, and coming back it was loaded with similar things. These are deck class passengers. This is the boat they use to go ashore. Most of the atolls don't have any kind of harbor or dock, so they would launch the boat and you go in and surf across the reef and then wade ashore. This is at one of the islands. This is these are two different pictures. The one on the left is the island of Sapwafik, and those are outrigger canoes that people built there. And the one on the right is the island of Mokil, and the Mokilese use these boats that are made from, apparently in the 19th century, a whale boat from an American whaler washed ashore in Mokil, and people admired it and started building boats just like it. So they're like half of a whale boat. And this is going ashore on one of the islands. And this is Mokil. All the islands are kind of the same. The village would be built along the edge of the lagoon, and then other islands around the lagoon or the backside of that island would be used for orchards. And one of the things we did when we visited islands that really worked out was, this was the days, of course, of chemical photography when it cost money and things. So I had my SLR camera, and we would take school pictures for the village, and then I would order prints. If there were, 8 kids in the picture, I would order 8 prints, so everybody would get one. So we were able to provide school pictures every place we went, and we were very popular for that. We were always welcome wherever we went, just for that reason. And this is the island of Nuku'oro. Nuku'oro and Kapingamarangi are in Micronesia, but they're culturally Polynesian islands and very different. Nuku'oro was just incredibly tidy with these straight paths and made of coral and beautifully organized and tidy. There you go. I could tell stories about Nuku'oro, but there's no time here to tell all these stories. You'll have to catch me separately. And this is the backside of island away from the village, where people are growing their food. And there's a taro patch. There's Linda sitting in a taro patch. And this is the big danger for these atolls, that these taro patches are dug out in the middle of the island, and with climate change, if there's a storm and salt water comes in there, it can destroy their crops and people have nothing to eat. And this is entering the lagoon at Kapingamarangi. So we finally gotten to Kapingamarangi. And there it is. There's the island. Those quaint little houses out on stilts are actually toilets, but we won't say that. We'll just ignore the picturesque nature of the view. And so we wandered around Kapingamarangi while we were there and drank coconuts and talked to people, and then we sailed away, having visited. So that was, I had achieved my goal that had been set when I was 5 years old or 6 years old. Finally, when I was in my 40s, we got there. And then after that, we were able to go around the rest of Micronesia. So we went to Palau, which is western end of Micronesia, and it's an incredibly beautiful place, famous for scuba diving and snorkeling, and then these traditional houses that each village had a house like this with the local history carved on stones on the inside. And then around Palau are these coral islands, which are quite wonderful. And this one, flying over this one, Linda and I, a dive boat actually dropped us on that little island, and we were able to spend the day on that beach all by ourselves and swim around the island, which was quite delightful and romantic. And then we were going to go to the outer islands of Palau to, I'm forgetting the name of them, Angkor and Peleliu. And to get there, you fly in this airplane, which is almost entirely filled with beer. I was sure the thing was never going to actually get off the runway with the people and all that beer in it, but it did. And this is the airport on Peleliu. And Peleliu was the scene of a huge battle during the Second World War between the Americans and the Japanese. So the island is covered with military wreckage. Tanks and guns and things all over the place. It's a tiny little island. We could walk around it in an hour, and people fought there for weeks and weeks. This was called Red Beach, where the Americans landed, and large numbers of people were killed. And this is the Japanese graveyard. And this is the one picture in my life where I've been in the right place at the right time. That was a blowhole. When the waves would come in, the air would come blasting out of there. And Linda is actually airborne in this picture. It actually picked her up and threw her off the ground and into the air. And I was there with the camera at just the right moment. And then we went to Guam. And Guam is much more developed than the rest of Micronesia. It's mostly military installations and Japanese tourism stations. And this is Saipan, which is, again, a Japanese beach resort kind of place. It's a very beautiful island, but there's no trees because they get typhoons there on a regular basis, and the trees constantly get blown down. So it's a little different. Then Chuck, we went, and that's Chuck. The main island is Wino, and we stayed on Dublon. And this is the fancy, relatively fancy hotel on Chuck, where we stayed, and not having any water in our house in Pohnpei for the year we were there, except what you could get in a bucket. We went to this hotel and took warm showers for at least 24 hours doing it. And then we took the ferry boat to Dublon, and this was one crowded ferry boat. And this is a house we stayed in Dublin. We were with this family that the fellow in the back middle was named Town Paul, and he'd been a traditional navigator in his youth, so I was fascinated by talking to him and getting to know him. And we'd met him on Pohnpei when he came for medical treatment, and then we visited with him on Chuuk, and these were all of his kids. Everybody sat in this room together, and Town would tell me stories about navigating and sailing and things like that, and the little girl on the right followed Linda around and did exactly everything Linda did the whole time we were there. And everybody on Dublin came to visit at one point or another. They would come and sit and visit, and we would chat politely, and then finally at some point in the interview they would ask me to stand up, and I would stand up, and they'd go, "Whoa," because I was so much taller than any of the people there. So that was the main attraction there, was this gigantic person who'd come to visit. This was people. These are the teenagers, the kids. While we were there every day, we would go on an outing with the boys. In the morning, I think in the afternoon, we'd go on an outing with the girls. And they would show us around and take us to interesting places, and we'd learn things. Yap. Yap. There's the main town in Yap, the only town in Yap, actually, on Yap. And that's downtown. I sat there for about an hour. It was so hot, really hot in Yap, and I sat there for at least an hour reading a book and relaxing in the heat. And during that time, this one motorcycle came by, so I took a picture of it because it was actually the only thing that happened while I was there. But Yap is full of these ancient pathways. They're paved with like flagstones through the jungle. Very ancient, and there's bridges, and it's just amazing because it's been settled for so long. And this is a village. This is a village which is, most of the families that were there are gone, and so now it's a museum village. And the big things, the big round things, are Yappies' money. Very important. There's Linda with I'm not sure, the Yappies equivalent of a loonie or whatever, but the money is there, and it's used for traditional payments of various kinds. And that's the men's house in the village. And this is the inside. You can see that building is all held together, tied with coconut husk. What's it called? What's the stuff called? I can't remember. Senate, called with Senate. So there's no nails or bolts or screws or anything. Everything's just tied and knotted together, which is the way things are built. And then on Yap, we went to a school graduation, and the students got the picture taken. Dancing culture everywhere. And then these are the Yappies students from the college. Doing the Yappies sex dance, the only way to describe it, a totally obscene dance that the Yappies do traditionally, and supposedly the men do it and the women aren't supposed to watch, but when they're doing it, the women all go and hide in the bushes and watch anyway. It really was a rude dance, but very well done. And here's some more student dances. Here's little kids learning how to do the Yappies sex dance, I think, when they probably don't know what it's about yet. And then we got to go to the outer, and that was important because these islands, at least at that time, were prohibited to visitors. So tourists couldn't go there, and yachts were not allowed to stop there and so forth. To go there, you had to have permission, and mostly the only people who were allowed to visit were academics and scientists and doctors and things. But because of our students at the college who were from the outer islands, we were able to get permission. So we had a letter from them to the chief of the outer islands, and we took it, and the chief wrote this letter to the lieutenant governor, and the lieutenant governor wrote a letter to the captain of the ship that said that we were allowed to go and visit the outer islands. So that was a super privilege that we had. And this is in Ulithi Lagoon, an island called Falalap, which has the only airstrip in the outer islands. And it was kind of exciting. When the plane came, the plane would circle overhead, and then everybody would run out and clean all the coconuts and things off the runway so the plane could land. So that was an exciting. And then everybody would go out and help to park the airplane and pump gas into it. And generally, it was a highly participatory airline. It was fun. So we spent several days on in the Ulithi Lagoon. And Ulithi, during World War II, the American Navy used Ulithi to gather the ships together before the invasion of Okanagan. So prior to the Normandy landing, it was the largest collection of warships the world had ever seen was in this giant lagoon. And this is an island called Mogmog. And my dad suggested that I go visit Mogmog because during the war, he'd been on a ship there, and they'd gone ashore on Mogmog and played baseball and drank beer. So I was able to take him this picture of Mogmog there, and then we went ashore there. And this is actually, I'm out of order here. This is a different family. This is one of our students' families, student Agatha and her family on Woolly Eye that we visited with. We were there for a couple days. And these are some kids on one of the islands. And this is the family on Mogmog. Got out of order there. So this is the family on Mogmog where my dad wanted me to go. And the clothing there, the women all wear these striped lava-lavas, and the men all wear sort of a loincloth like Japanese wrestlers. And that's it. And so there's the laundry. You just have one line full of lava, one line full of loincloths, and then they're all hand woven on these looms. There's Linda with a loom. What's it called? A backstrap loom. And this is a small island. We just walked around and around the island. You could do there, but it's pretty. There's a ship just coming into the lagoon. This was our hostess on Falalap. A delightful couple. We again, their niece was one of our students, and we'd met them when we were in Pohnpei. And the gentleman in the house taught me the joys of the mid-morning nap. It was a nice custom. And then we're getting ready to leave on the airplane. This was our host's little child who went with us everywhere while we were there. And we've got flowers in our hair and around our necks, which is customary in Micronesia. And had a brief time volunteering on Tarawa in Kiribati. Again, another war zone, huge war and cannons everywhere. And Kiribati is just this long, narrow, or Tarawa is this long, narrow island surrounding a lagoon. And so this picture and the next one were taken in the same place. That's the ocean side with the surf, and that's the lagoon side where it's calm and quiet, and that's the whole thing. It's 20 some odd miles long and about that wide. And the public transit system is this collection of buses that race for fares. They're called things like Rambo and Conan the Destroyer, and they charge up and down the island desperately trying to find customers. It's quite fun. This is a school in Kiribati. Kiribati was a former British colony, so they're a bit more organized in forms and things. And we visited a small village called Nabena. We were welcomed, and then we were welcomed by these girls in Nabena who did a Kiribati welcome dance, which was quite lovely and charming. And then the next day was Independence Day in Kiribati, and we went to the independence ceremonies, and that's the president and his wife with the professional Kiribati dance company doing exactly the same dance for them that the little girls had done for us the day before. So it was quite an honor for us, and quite wonderful. And again, dancing is a huge part of dancing and a huge part of life in Kiribati, as is getting tuba from trees. And then because it was Independence Day, they had sailboat races, and we were able to go to those. So we sailed across the lagoon in a racing rigger, and then got to watch the races. And there's different classes, the garbage bag class, I think, of boats for sails. That's the buoy that people had to sail around. So that was the adventure to Kapingamarangi. And we got back to Hawaii just in time to the big island of Hawaii, just in time for the volcano eruption. So it was a very exciting time to be there. And we felt like we were drowning as we went back into real life. And we're back in Shawnigan Lake. So I don't know if you could hear this or not. Thanks for listening. It was a very, very important part of my life, and I know Linda's. And it was an amazing adventure. And thank you very much.